Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Love Fruit Podcast. And today I have another special guest joining us all the way from Arizona in the US, and that's Ronnie Skurow. And Ronnie's been into the raw food lifestyle for about 20 years, and him and his wife Minh have taught at the Living Light Culinary Institute. They've done special trainings for corporations, teaching people about raw foods. They also run a farm and a bed and breakfast out there in Arizona, and they try and introduce raw foods to people through that. And I came across him on Facebook, I think, because you would share excellent posts about the food that your wife was making you and about the fun you were having on a raw vegan diet. So, Ronnie, I'm really glad that you joined us today. I think this is going to be very interesting. I don't know a lot about you yet, but I'm looking forward to learning more.
Great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your guests.
So let's talk a little bit about, where did this start for you? Were you brought up in a kind of health conscious household or anything like that?
No, quite the opposite. I was brought up in, I would call a typical American household, but I was born in 1949. And a lot of things started happening right about that time. It was when TV first started out. It was when commercials, first appeared on television, and when mass food marketing really started. So I was exposed to really the worst food. We had things called TV dinners. I don't know. Yeah. And so it was basically bad food cooked in an aluminum container, which we now know is one of the worst ways you can prepare food.
Wow.
For human consumption, is to cook it, have anything to do with aluminum. And these things were cooked in the aluminum. You ate them out of the aluminum, and they were a huge hit back then because my mom didn't have to cook food anymore. She could just toss that thing in the oven, heat it up.
Yeah.
And they advertised it as healthy. So I grew up eating all the worst junk. Bologna sandwiches on white bread with mayonnaise and a bag of potato chips was my standard lunch in school there almost every single day. And I lived that way until I was about, till I was about 22, 23 years old. And I met a girl that I fell in love with. And one of the first things she told me, she said, "You have to know that I'm a vegetarian," because back then vegetarian was considered very strange.
Sure.
It was not an accepted thing. It was nothing that we heard about in school. And anyway, when she said that, I looked into her eyes and I said, "Wow, that's unbelievable, because I'm a vegetarian too." So I became a vegetarian that day instantly because I wanted to pursue this girl, which I did. And we had a wonderful relationship, and she was a 100% vegetarian. A junk vegetarian, which I came to learn later on, what a junk vegetarian is. And so was I. I became a junk vegetarian immediately. And I lived that way. I went on after we broke up our relationship, we were young. And I went on to live that way for, I just kept on living the vegetarian lifestyle. I got used to it. I didn't want anything to do with eating animals. But I was eating a heavily junk, pizza.
Sure.
Cheese pizza was considered healthy vegetarian, which is it's terrible. But anyway, and I lived that way for many, many years. And then later on in life, how I became a raw foodist was I was an executive for a big spa, the Oasis Resort, and I was basically running the place. And I was really interested. I got really heavily into how the food that we were serving and how we were making it and where it was coming from and everything about it. And I learned everything from top to bottom, where the suppliers, where we got the food, where they got the food from. And as I'm learning all of this stuff about the food, I decided that I wanted to open up a fast food franchise based on vegetarian food. And not even vegan, just vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I researched it totally, what it would take, and I kept thinking about doing it. And in my research, I was asking some people about anybody who had done this before or who might have had some success with it. And I was steered towards a lady named Barbara Rogers, who was a herbologist. I believe she still is. And she had a pretty well-known company that made herb makeup and lotions
Sure.
and potions for women and for men. And that was she was the one who made the recipes. That was her, and she started this company. And anyway, so I was told that she had opened a vegetarian restaurant in Las Vegas, Nevada. So I went to meet Barbara, and it turns out that it wasn't a vegetarian restaurant. It was a raw restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And I had never even heard of raw food at this time. This would have been right around, 1998, something like that. Anyway, and so when I meet her, she started telling me what raw food was and what it was all about. And I just immediately became fascinated with this. And she told me that she was going to open this, had opened this raw food restaurant in Las Vegas. And she partnered with a girl who is, I don't know if you know Chef Giuliano. Have you heard of Chef Giuliano?
Yes,
Well,
I have, yeah.
his sister is named Cara. Have you heard
Yes.
of Marcus Rothkrantz?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, Marcus is significant other, and Marcus, I love him. He's a dear friend of mine. His significant other is Cara, whose brother is Giuliano, and she and her opened up the first raw food restaurant in the modern United States. There was one back in the 30s and 40s that was quite famous in Southern California, but she opened one in San Francisco before anybody else in the United States did. Terrific foresight. And so anyway, Barbara, and with the help of Cara, is going to open up this had opened this restaurant in Las Vegas and put together a menu. And so I learned about it, and I became totally fascinated about it. And then I started studying it. And there was a few people out there. The Batenkos, excuse me, I pronounced it. They were going around the country back when they were husband and wife, and they were lecturing about it a little bit then. And I think David Wolf was talking about it, part of his deal. And so I researched everything I could. And of course, Sherry was out there. She had, I think she was just starting to put together Living Light Culinary Arts Institute. She was doing trainings. And then, so anyway, so I became fascinated by it. And then I just jumped into it 100%. And I just, got everything that I could find. Every book that came out about raw food, I just devoured. And of course, when I met my wife, the whole new world of raw food opened up to me, because she grew up in Vietnam, in the jungle in Vietnam, and she didn't have electricity. She was the youngest of 8 children growing up in a household with a single mother, no father. And they had to live off of raw food. They didn't have a refrigerator.
Wow.
They didn't have any way, to and they were Buddhists, and their sect of Buddhism was very heavily into vegan, totally vegan. And so you combine that with having to eat fresh food, and you're a raw foodist without even knowing what raw food was. And I learned how to make raw food myself. Since I've forgotten everything, because my wife doesn't allow me to make anything anymore. But even after I learned everything that was out there about raw food, when I learned my wife's style, it is totally different than anything, the raw food that you're used to. But anyway, that's basically how I got into it. And it's been a fantastic thing and journey in my life, in addition to my life. At 71, mentally and spiritually, I feel like I'm 17. I really do. And physically, I mean, I'm in good shape. I got my little trampoline behind me. We walk every day. We exercise. So I'm in pretty good shape. But at 71, I can honestly say that I think I feel better physically than I did when I was a junk vegetarian at age 35.
So you didn't have any specific health issues or anything that came up that got you into raw? It's more like you just happened to you were open to the information, you met people coincidentally, and it just made sense to you and you sort of embraced it.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
No health issue forced me into it.
And tell us about some of the benefits you've felt with the raw food lifestyle.
Well, if I had to sum it up into 2 words, I would say I feel cleaner and lighter. But I feel like I've cleaned. I mean, I went into it and I followed the Essene Gospel of Peace instructions for getting into a raw food diet. I fasted. I tried to clean myself out and get rid of as much junk as I could through fasting. And then I started with a real simple diet, and I added to it all, as I got into it. But I've noticed that my energy level is better, my clarity level of thinking, of physicality, as far as eating, going, the body functions and cycles of releasing the food, everything is better.
Yeah.
And I have to say that after really learning about it and following my instincts and never stopping to learn, that it is so much simpler.
Yeah.
I can go anywhere in the world probably. I mean, I've never been out of the United States except for one day in Canada and one day in Mexico, but I can go anywhere in the United States and find a supermarket, and I can feed myself. I can find fruit. I can find greens. And it's so simple because I can just eat off of fruit if I want to and feel fantastic. And many days that's what I do. But my wife can put together a fantastic gourmet meal and we can enjoy it. But I can get as much joy now, honestly, out of eating an apple. Wow. Because it's that contact with nature that gets me off.
Right.
And that's what raw food gives me. I feel connected to whatever nature is, whatever that intelligence is, which I don't claim to know, that created life, that put all these things here for us to enjoy for free and easily. Food, water, air, sunshine, it's all free. It's all easy to find. All these things given to us for free, it can't be by chance. And so anytime I can connect with nature, whether it's eating an apple or taking a walk out in the fresh air, it just gets everything in my body going.
Do you think that's the problem? Like that if people are eating this, like, cooked food, processed food diet, that they're disconnected from that?
Oh, absolutely. Because they're connected with the world of chemistry.
Right.
I mean, there are a few people who probably raise their own cows and slaughter them and that's the whole different than going to the supermarket and buying hamburger, which might have the meat from 300 different cows chopped into one little hamburger.
Right.
And who knows how many chemicals these cows have been eating. You don't even know what you're eating anymore. People don't. When you buy processed food, you have no idea what you're getting. You're getting a pretty package that says, welcome to nature on the outside. But on the inside, you're getting some piece of crap that came out of a laboratory somewhere. True.
Yeah. So let me talk about. Let's talk about your approach to raw food. Like, has the way that you've eaten this diet changed? Did you find it? Well, let's talk about the start. What was your transition like to a raw diet? Did it take you a long time to kind of change, or was it more quick for you?
Well, I changed overnight. I just committed to it once it made sense in my mind, and I knew I wanted to do it. I just changed overnight, and it was like being dropped off on an island. And okay, well, now go feed yourself. and so I like I said, I got Sherry's book. She had her book. I forget the name of it now, but her first book was out. Living Angels or something like that, something to do with angels. But I got her book. I got some other books. There actually were, when I researched it, I found a lot on books on eBay that were written in the 20s and 30s about raw food. It was very popular for a while. Before chemistry took over everything, it was very popular, and there was a lot of great books written back there by a lot of great guys. And so I studied all that, and I learned how to make things. Some of it was complicated, and some of it, like obviously like eating a banana is not complicated, but some of these recipes were complicated. You had to soak things, sprout things, mix things. I had to buy a bunch of equipment. I had bought dehydrators, blenders, mixers, you name it. I just jumped into it full speed, and I was making a lot of complicated stuff, and it changed, and I changed to simplicity. The further I got into it, the more I got into simplicity. I can still enjoy a gourmet meal, but I really appreciate the simplistic raw food diet, lifestyle, whatever you call it, that we live now. So I'd say I went into it. I learned as much as I could. I learned all the complicated stuff because that's all it was back then.
Right.
And it slowly changed a little bit. But I changed more than it did. I went more for the simplicity. And again, because of meeting my wife, I went in a whole different direction.
Yeah. So what would a typical day look like for you at the moment?
Well, I wake up and I have basically fruit. I'll
Mhm.
wake up and the first thing I eat is black garlic. I eat 1 clove of black garlic. And then I'll drink some water. And depending on how I feel, I might drink just a half a glass of water, a full glass of water.
Mhm.
And then I'll have a few bananas, 2 or 3 bananas. And I wait in between each one of these foods, probably 5 to 10 minutes. I let it kind of cycle through a little bit, get out of my esophagus, at least
Yeah.
make it to the, make it down somewhere. And then I'll usually have an orange or some kind of citrus, but basically it's usually an orange. And then after that, I'll have a date, a date. And then after that, I'll have usually a big piece of beet. We grow a lot of beets, and
Mhm.
I love the beetroot. I'll have the beetroot. And then usually I'll stop. And some days I'll mix it up. Some days I won't have one. I'll have something different. I might have a persimmon instead of
Yeah.
something else. I might have an apple. But then I'll stop, and then I'll clean my teeth real good. And then I won't have any more food until lunch. Usually, I might snack a little bit, but really a little bit. And something really clean like grapes. I don't want to eat food that's going to gum up my teeth or
Mhm.
leave residue in my throat and mouth, until I've had my lunch. So I might eat grapes, watermelon, something
Yeah.
that's real clean. And and then lunch will usually be a salad or a green wrap or a gourmet meal. If Minh makes something, feels like making something, and she's experimenting, she'll say, "Here, I'm making this today."
Yeah.
But I'll eat a big wrap, green wrap, or a salad. I try to eat that every day for lunch, unless she interferes. I eat something else. And then usually that's it, except for snacks. But often, because my wife, she just wants to keep feeding me and feeding me. Often
Mhm.
later in the evening, around 4 or 5 o'clock, she'll say, "Oh, I made this. You got to eat this. You got to help me eat this. I can't throw the food away." And so I end up eating some more. But the basic diet now is fruit and salad.
And all vegan as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Uh-huh. And do you do any supplements, anything on top of that?
Nothing. No supplements. No. I don't take any medications. I mean, I would if I needed to, I guess, but
Mhm.
I don't.
Mhm.
If I knew I needed to, but I don't take any supplements. I've never been into the supplements. I've never been
Sure.
into the vitamins. So I really don't take any of that stuff.
And what's your sort of philosophy on that? Is that from what you've learned? Is it just your own experience, or where do you stand with all that kind of stuff?
Well, my basic stance is this. I don't believe in refined foods and concentrated foods.
Mhm.
I don't do juicing, and I get in a lot of arguments with raw foodists, especially people that get started because they're juicing and they're so into it, and it's great. It has its purpose.
Yeah.
If you're fasting or you feel a need or there's a medical reason to juice, but yeah, I mean, in nature, you would never juice. You would never put that concentrated amount of food into your body. So when you're eating vitamins, that's what you're doing. You're putting these isolated, concentrated uh, ingredients, things
Yeah.
into your body, and then you're putting them in combinations that your body's not looking to accept. There's
Mhm.
a lot of these vitamins that offset the other one.
Mhm.
And so, and it's all based on marketing and profits. There's a bit, you'd be hard pressed to find a company that said, "Hey, we're going to create the greatest vitamin in the world because we just love people, and we don't care if we make money or not. We don't care if anybody buys it. We're just going to make." That doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
They start with the marketing first, and then develop the product afterwards. So I don't trust it, and I don't believe in it, and I think that my total philosophy, and I wrote a book about it, but it's a very obscure book because I haven't published it. Because one of the greatest knowledge that I found is in obscure books. Go find a copy of the Essene Gospel Peace.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
obscure, but anyway, and my entire philosophy basically boils down to this: I put my trust in nature. If something like a giraffe or an elephant can live on leaves and blades
Yeah.
of grass, and has no concern about where it gets protein or where it gets this and that, then surely I can do the same. I think I'm as intelligent as an elephant. Maybe not, but inside in my body is that same intelligence that's inside the elephant. You can't get around that. We are animals in our bodies. We may be something else in our minds. I mean, we are, but in our bodies, we're more similar than an elephant than we are, a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
And so I just don't put my trust in things that people are selling in the vitamin supplements.
So you mentioned health philosophy, and I think you've got a DVD that also mentions health, kind of healthy living philosophy. And I'd like to ask you about that. Like, what do you think are the fundamental philosophies, ideas that a person has to embrace to really understand how to live a healthy life?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do, and I studied philosophy when I went to college. That's what I studied. I don't claim to be a philosopher. I'm only a philosopher in the extent that philosophy is two things. It's the study of how people think and how they come to conclusions and how they find the truth. That's the study of philosophy, and every philosopher usually does it a different way. And then there's the study of philosophers and their individual philosophy. So my philosophy about food is basically this. We're living creatures. And since the dawn of time, people have been trying to figure out what life is. And nobody has, and nobody ever will, because it's not something that we are given the kind of brain to understand what we even are. I predict we will never understand what life is. We can describe it. Doctors can say, oh, life starts at conception and blah, blah, blah. But they don't know how it happens. They don't know how it's done. Nobody can explain how a blade of grass grows. They cannot do it. They can only describe what they can see. And I might go off on tangents here, but I got to bring in some other points to make it all clear.
Sure.
One idea that you need to grasp is this. When you look at anything, whether it's the outside world into outer space, or you look into the inner world, it's always expanding.
Right.
The things that we know today, we didn't know existed before. We didn't know cells existed. We just knew people existed. And then we knew that people had organs. And then we got down to cells. And then we got microscopes. And then we said, wait a minute, there's all kinds of stuff in there. And the more powerful the microscopes get, the more we find is out there, and it expands faster than we can learn it. The same thing with outer space. All we knew before was there was a sun and a moon, and people looked up and they prayed to it. Now we fly to the outer space and we take people to the moon. And every time we go somewhere, we find out, and every time the telescopes get bigger, we find out that there's more out there to learn than we thought there was before. And it keeps expanding. So actually, on a percentage-wise, man is getting less smart as time goes by, because the more we learn, the more we find out that there's more out there than we ever thought existed. So when it comes to life, we don't know what's going on, and we never will. And so when you just put your trust in nature, then you don't have to worry about these things. I never think about proteins or any of this stuff, or vitamins, or where do I get this, or where do I get that? I never think about it, because I don't think it means anything. I can look at I have a grandson, and he eats the worst food on the planet. These horrible chips that are full of, I don't want to mention the brand name, but they're the most popular chip in the world. They make them, everything from barbecue. They have like 12 different flavors. Yeah. And they are so horrible. And they're right on the food shelves, right at eye level, where kids can't pass them up. And they're just full of salt and grease and processed grains, just terrible stuff, terrible combinations. And he eats it constantly. And when he's not eating that, he's eating pizza, and he's washing it down with Coca-Colas. And you know what? He's just a perfect little growing human, and the brain is developing and the body's growing, eating total garbage. Yeah. So, nobody can explain to me how the human body grows and what it needs and what it takes. Now, he may pay for that later on with clogged arteries, or he may not. But nobody's going to explain how that body is overcoming all this and growing into a human being. So I don't think about it. I put my trust in nature, and I know that if I'm eating food that came from nature, I can't go wrong. And if I'm eating food that came, if I was going to, or people who are eating food that come from factories or from a warehouse, you're rolling the dice because you don't know what's in there. You don't know how long it was kept. I've worked in big corporations. I've been around big businesses, and I've been retired for 18 years. But I've been in my careers, I've been around some big companies, and they'll do anything for a profit. They won't honor expiration dates. They'll say, just sell it, get it out of here, move it.
Wow.
I mean, some people will, some people won't. And we've seen it over and over again, how corporations and companies and people, greed will overtake their decision making. So there is no greed in nature. It's just nature. It has no agenda. And that's my philosophy, is if you just don't even look at it as raw food, look at it as a connection with nature and with the food that we've been given to eat for free. I mean,
amazing.
It's so simple when you really get down, like the philosophy, one of the philosophies is like, well, God or whoever you believe, creator, whatever you think, a chance, however you think this world and we got created, isn't it amazing that everything that we need when we come into this world is out there free? We don't pay for air. We don't pay for water, not the water that falls from the sky anyway. We don't pay for sunshine. We don't pay for food. It grows. I mean, we pay for it now in this modern century because everything has to go through the system. But it's all been given to us. Fruit trees are out there. We didn't have to create them. And so if you look at it, well, what would the food that we would be created to eat then? Well, of course, it would be the easiest food to get. What kind of a system would make a food that would put you in jeopardy of getting killed by an animal trying to capture that food? No. If a God or nature or a chance wanted you to live easily, they would make things like grapes that you could just go pick and eat. Yeah. Pick the leaves and eat the grape leaves, which we grow grapes and eat the leaves, and they're fantastic. And so anyway, when you really put your trust in nature and you look at it from many levels, not only philosophy, but just from physicality, it's just obvious that we're meant to eat living food that came from nature. And I don't believe we're meant to eat animals. I don't down on people that eat animals or argue with them or anything like that, but I've just come to believe spiritually and physically, it's just not something that we should be doing. And the one thing I left out, and then also, the Essene philosophy, their core philosophy is you cannot kill, and you can't kill anything. Now they're saying you can't kill people, and you can't kill food. You can't kill the food that you put into your mouth. So if you take something and you microwave it, or you put it in a fire, you're killing it. Yeah. And if there is something in there that your body, some kind of life spirit that your body's going to need, it's going to have a hard time finding it in something that you've roasted at 300 degrees for 20 minutes. So, so nature and not cooking, that's my core philosophy, I guess.
And I would like to know a little bit about, you talking about some of the books and things that you read early on. I'd like to know what do you think had the most influence on you, and do you want to pick out some writings or books or different influences that you had?
Sure. Well, I read them all, and I have a hard time remember these names or pronouncing them right, but there was the mucusless diet. I can't remember his name now, but he wrote it.
Yeah, Arnold Edit.
Yeah, right. Arnold Edit. I don't believe that's his real name, but that's his. Anyway, he and then there was a lot of them, and I can't, because a lot of these were like just one-time articles that were in magazines where people wrote like 3- and 4-page articles about raw food. But actually, my biggest influence, I have to say, was the Essene Gospel of Peace. It made the most sense to me as far as nutrition, not as far as like religion. It's not really a religious book, but as far as religion or philosophy, it's in there. But basically, what it had to say about food resonated with me more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it basically talks about like not killing your food, not setting fire to your food, sort of that kind of thing.
Yeah, it talks about not killing anything, not
Yeah.
not killing your food, and it talks about I mean, everything it said. And some people believe that the Essene Gospel piece was written thousands of years ago, and some people believe it was an invention of a man who just did it to make money and came out with it in the 20s or 30s. I think it came out in the 30s. But anyway, when he came out with it, it was so revolutionary and so ahead of his time and obscure. Nobody read it. Nobody read it back then. Very few people read it now. But everything in there makes perfect sense. And the more I have learned about raw food, I've still found nothing in there that I can say, oh no, see, this is bullshit. No,
right.
Everything makes sense. And whether it came from this man's mind in 1930 or whether it came from thousands of years ago and he did just interpret it from archives in the Vatican like he says he did, I'll take his word on it. But it rings true. It rings true. And there's a lot of teachings in there. It tells you how to get started, what to eat. And it does it in such simplistic terms. A lot of the trouble that we're in today in so many areas, not only food, is that, say a guy like me or anybody has an idea and they want to get it out there. Well, you got to find a way to make money with it or you're not going to get it out there, basically. You're going to have a hard time getting it out there. And so to do it, they put together a system and then they start adding stuff and selling stuff and making it more complicated. But when you take everything down to its core, which is what the Essene Gospel of Peace teaches, that's where you find the really good stuff. And that's not the only source. There's a lot of great books out there, and there's but a lot of them end up with preparing really complicated stuff, and a lot of them end up trying to sell you supplements because, again, they got to make a living. And I totally understand that. It's rough to.
Do you think that's what it's all about? Just out of interest, there's been a lot of people in the raw food movement that have sold different supplements and things like that. Do you think that's always been just about them trying to find a way of making a living?
Yeah, I do. I think that there are people who understand and learn about the benefits of different nutrients and supplements, and they might say, well, this is good for this, and if you have a cold, this is good to take. And I think there's a lot of real good knowledge in that and a real good thing. But the thing you have to realize is that all these supplements come from basically one or two places. I mean, there's a giant place where they have a warehouse, and I can call them up, or anybody can call them up, and they can say, hey, my name is, so-and-so, and I want to create a supplement, and I want you to put this in there, and this in there, and this in there, and this percentage, and just make sure that I'm not copying anybody else's. If somebody else's has 2% of this, give me 1.5 so I can say my formula is unique and different. And then I'll handle the labeling, I'll handle the marketing, and then you put it in a capsule, put it in a gel, put it in, in a bottle, whatever you want to do. But it all comes from one or two places, and it's all the same stuff. And it's all based on a profit-making business. It's like saying, do you believe that preachers care about money, or are they really interested in God? Well, how do you know? How can you tell? And what does money have to do with God? Well, what does supplements have to do with natural eating, which is what every living creature on earth other than us does? I mean, I tell people only drink water. Unless once a month, my wife makes a big batch of crackers, raw crackers, and she juices a lot of carrots to get the pulp to make as the base for the crackers. And so I drink some carrot juice once a month. Now, is it going to kill me or hurt me? No, hopefully not. But I don't believe in juicing, and I don't juice on a regular basis. And every other living creature on this planet, every single one of them, only drinks water.
Yeah.
Every creature on earth except for us. And so, what makes us think that we need something more than water, or that your body's looking for something? So I drink only water. And like I say, I'll have a juice once a month, or if I'm at a social gathering among raw foodists, a celebration or party, and they're serving juice, I'll certainly partake and enjoy it. But simplicity.
So let me ask you about within the raw food movement or community. Have you been to a lot of different events and restaurants and things, and met a lot of people in the movement? Like, what's been your experiences like?
Well, I met them all, because when I first found the first raw food gatherings were out in Arizona, in Sedona, Arizona, by a gal, and her name is Happy, and she started the raw food festivals. And
Right.
I didn't. The first one had just concluded when I found out about it, but the first one was really in like a meeting of 8 people around a creek. And but anyway, and so I met Happy. My wife made a meal for her, and I'll never forget what happened to Happy. She couldn't. We were there with her and an associate that she had brought along, and my wife and I. We were in Sedona, Arizona, and Minh made a meal for her. And after she took like 2 bites, she couldn't speak. She had never tasted anything like this
Wow.
food, and she'll tell you this herself. And anyway, and so we did a demonstration, and we had a booth at the second Raw Food Festival, and we had, from then on until they stopped having them, we had a booth there. And a lot of raw foodists came to my farm. I met them all. I met every single one of them that you can name. I met them all, talked with them all, got along with some of them, didn't get along with a lot of them.
Really?
Yeah, learned from some of them, kind of looked at some of them and said, well, I don't want to learn whatever they're doing. And I mean, it's a vast spectrum of personalities.
Yeah.
But anyway, I learned them all, and I went to every single raw restaurant. My wife and I, we went around the country doing demonstrations.
Yeah.
And we would typically go somewhere like, name a city. We'd go there on a Friday night and do a free talk. And then we'd charge people to come to a 2 days of classes where we taught them how to make the food.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to know every raw foodist, every raw food restaurant as they were popping up. We consulted with many of them, because if we go into a raw food restaurant, I remember going into, I can't think of the name of it, but it'll come to me in a second here. It's a lady's name. It was in San Francisco, and it was the most gourmet, elaborate raw food restaurant ever created, and it was basically a hobby. And I wanted to see their kitchen, because this is the type of place you went in. They had tablecloths. There was a piano player in the corner playing, music.
Wow.
Candles on the table. An average meal was about $50.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. Oh, thank you. Here's my honey. Just bringing some pomegranate. Want to say hi?
Hi.
Hi, Minh.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Roxanne's. The name of the place was Roxanne's. Minh and I were there. I'm telling you about the time we went to San Francisco with Greg to the restaurant, the fancy restaurant. Anyway, and so we wanted to see the kitchen, and they had a big sign, nobody's allowed in the kitchen. So
yeah,
made up a story that I think it was Minh's birthday, and we started taking pictures, and we said, oh, can't we just take a picture? We ended up in the kitchen taking pictures of everything in the kitchen, so I could see how their operation was. But okay, bye, honey. Thank you. We went, and every time we found out about a restaurant opening, we'd go there. Even if we had to drive a couple thousand miles to get there, we'd go there to meet the owners, to find out about it, to see what they were doing. And it was just something we wanted to do, because, So I saw it all.
Yeah, it's something. There's a great community of people, really. Do you feel that? Like, it's always really something about the raw food community is really interesting and attracts a lot of cool people.
Yeah, it attracts a lot of cool people, a lot of interesting people. But I have to say this, and without mentioning individual names, among the people that are raw food personalities, that's where I met some really disturbing people that I didn't like. I didn't like what they were doing. I see through what they're doing. And I've met some great people. I've met some great people. And but it's like any other business. You can find an honest used car salesman out there. You got to look really hard, but you'll find one somewhere. But 99% of them are dishonest. Well, probably the majority of raw food personalities and people promoting it are really nice, honest people. But there's a lot that really aren't. Sure. That's all I really want to say about that.
Yeah, sure. You've got like an interesting background. We've not talked about this, but you were a musician. You had a band. I believe the band was named after your surname. let me correct me with the right pronunciation, Skurow or Skurow.
That's pretty close.
You're a violin player,
Yes.
and from what I've seen you post before, you played some pretty cool big gigs back in the day and supported different bands, and I get the feeling you had a bit of an audience yourself as well. I don't know the full story, but I'd like to hear more about it.
Well, basically what happened was I had finished high school, I was going to college, and everybody was playing music back then. I think I was like 14 or 15 when the Beatles hit and the Rolling Stones. And so we all grew up crazy with the music and the hippies and everything. And I had long hair and I was a hippie. And I had played music pretty much all my life. I started playing when I heard Bob Dylan. I think I was about 13 years old, and I started playing the violin when I was about 5. But when I was about 13, I heard Bob Dylan, and then I had to get a guitar. And I put down the violin and started playing the guitar. And everybody had a guitar back then. We were all musicians, and some of us actually were, and some of us actually weren't. And I don't know if I was a born musician, but I worked real hard at it. And I wrote some songs, and I went into a concert promoter's office one day with a tape of 4 songs that I had written, and I played them for him. And he looked at me and he said, "Let's put a band together." He said, "Why don't you put a band together and I'll be your manager?" And he was one of the largest concert promoters in the United States. He was booking the tours for all the big bands, from Jethro Tull to, I mean, you name it, all the big bands. He would book their tours around the United States or in certain sections of the United States. So anyway, I jumped on the opportunity. I put a band together and I revolved it around my violin playing and the songs that I had written. And consequently, because he was booking these tours and he was managing us, he would have us be the opening act. We would be playing while the lights were on and people were finding their seats, kind of looking at us. Sometimes they'd pay attention, but sometimes, and usually it would be like 3 or 4 bands. It would be like a Grand Funk Railroad, Freddie King, Elvin Bishop, and Skurow would be down at the bottom because nobody knew who we were. And then sometimes in some towns it would just be like the main band, like Jethro Tull and us. And so people did pay attention to us because there was only 2 bands. And so we would start playing, when the lights went out. But anyway, because we had this great manager who had all these connections and all these tours, we got all this promotion that we probably would have never had or certainly didn't deserve on the merits of our tunes. But so we ended up traveling all through the United States on many different tours of some of the greatest bands in the world. And we got to know some of them we didn't. But we got to play on stage with them and see how they operated. And London Records signed us to a contract, and they put out some feelers. They released some songs of ours in some selected markets, and they didn't do very well. And so they didn't keep us or record an album with us. But I had 3 years of, living the rock and roll lifestyle, touring the United States, playing big places, 20, 25,000 seats, sometime auditoriums.
My goodness, wow.
Yeah, the smallest venues we would have played would have been like, maybe 5,000 people.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it was just a great time. And I still play my fiddle. I play a lot of bluegrass now and jazz. And music is one of those things that keeps your mind, keeps your mind sharp.
I've got a friend who's a huge Jethro Tull fan. I'm sure that he'll be very jealous when I tell him this story.
Yeah, Jethro Tull put out a 40, I don't have it in front of me, but it put out a 40 or a 50-year thick as a brick package. And it's not many people have it because I think it's about $50, but it's a CD and then it's a booklet. And in that booklet, they show some posters and stuff from their different, and there we are. There's a poster, Jethro Tull and Skurow in their book. Nice. And it's like I could show people and say, look, I really did do this.
What were some of the other acts that you played with that you remember?
We played with the Rare Earth. We played with Freddie King, Grand Funk Railroad, Jethro Tull, Elvin Bishop, Savoy Brown, a band from, I believe, England.
Sure.
Leon Russell. I know I'm going to forget a lot of them. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool. And you said you ended up How did you make that transition, ending up working for a resort?
Well, my family, my father, and my grandfather were in the casino business. They owned and operated casinos. And so everybody in my family, my brother, my mother, my father, my grandfather, everybody was connected to gambling. And we ended up in Las Vegas, 1955. My father used to operate illegal casinos back in Kentucky, and big casinos, bigger than the ones that were in Las Vegas in those days. And anyway, and when they closed down the illegal casinos, we moved out to Las Vegas, but we were still in the gambling business. And so when I moved to Las Vegas, it was so small, you wouldn't even believe what I mean, there was on the strip where all these resorts are, there wasn't even sidewalks. It was just desert and a hotel there. And anyway, so as growing up, there was always opportunities for me to go into the gambling business because I already knew it inside out. I had started working with dice when I was a kid. My father had all the training equipment in the basement to train people to be dealers and that. And so I used to play with that stuff and help them teach. And so anyway, so after the band failed, or I didn't want to pursue it anymore. I had this golden opportunity to go walk into the casino resort business. And so I did. And I started basically at the bottom as a dealer, and I ended up being an executive with the MGM Grand. The original MGM was the biggest casino in the world at that time. And then after they had a real tragic fire there, I think about 75 people died there. And we were closed down for about 9 months. I still worked for the corporation, but after they reopened, my heart wasn't in it, and I was looking for something else. And a gentleman, he's passed away now, who invented the video poker machine, he called me one day and he said, "Ronnie, I'm building a big resort up in this town of Mesquite. There's nothing up there now. It's about an hour north Las Vegas. And it's a nice little town on a river. And I bought a big piece of land up there. I'm going to build a huge resort." And I helped him do it. And I worked for him for 18 years. And even though my expertise was in gaming, I had to learn as much as I could and everything I could about food and restaurants and hotels, because we had to make this place work. And so that's how I got into it. And I wouldn't say my heart was in it, but it was a good way to make a living. I loved living in this little town in Mesquite, and I could pursue my philosophical and agricultural ambitions and while I was doing this. And so I did that for a long time, and then retired from it.
And what did you learn much with all your experience, for people out there who might be interested in putting together some kind of maybe a resort, maybe a restaurant, maybe something for Raw Foodists? Do you have any advice or ideas?
Oh, you bet I do. You bet I do. We have a whole formula for what we believe will transform, but not transform, but give people. United States now, you got a choice between 8 different big food chains that are all serving the same junk, whether it's pizza or hamburgers or Mexican, it's fried chicken. It's basically the same stuff. It's grease, salt, sugar, fat. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's been many documentaries made about what's going on in the food business, but all that's out there is junk for many reasons. And the main reason is money, because it's cheaper to sell junk. It's better to sell junk. People will eat junk more than they'll eat healthy food. And so because of money, our food system is just turned into a cesspool. But ever since day one, because my original way, as I told you earlier, that I got into raw food was because I wanted to open up a vegan restaurant. And it's not about the money. That's not my motivation. The money you have to make it profitable to expand. Otherwise, you're going to have one restaurant and go out of business. So you have to make something that's profitable. But that's just for the purpose so you can expand it around the world. But I've never given up on my idea of putting food out there that would be healthy and could compete with fast food hamburgers and pizza. And I have it. I have that formula. And we're going to find a way to get it out there, whether we do it ourselves. I don't want to, because I'm 71 years old and I'm playing music 6 hours a day. I'm farming. I'm really busy. So I don't really have it in me to do it, but I'll find somebody who does. And we're going to start this thing, and we're going to start it in Las Vegas, because people from all over the world come to Las Vegas. and it's the perfect place to start a franchise. And I guarantee you, within this next year, because a lot of things are in the works right now, we will kick off this franchise, and you will see a food that you've never been exposed to before that
sounds exciting.
that people will accept.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I'd love to hear more about that. When it'd be good to do another one of these maybe when you're further down that line, or it'd be great to be able to invite people to that. Let's talk about, you live in Arizona, you have a bed and breakfast. Would you like to let people know a little bit about that?
Well, I don't like to force it on people, because some people, it's like religion, they get turned off right away. And one thing I've learned from teaching, from going around with my wife doing demonstrations, is people don't like to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. And especially when it comes to personal habits and mm-hmm. food, mm-hmm. and nothing's more personal than eating. And so, I'm sorry, what was the original question?
Well, the question was about your bed and breakfast and what do you...
Oh, so when people come there, for a while I was leaving our DVDs on the table with a bowl of fruit, mm-hmm. and nobody ever took our DVDs. And I thought, well, we did sell actually, thousands of these DVDs. There was, when the interest raw food was really happening, there was a big interest. But I'll leave them on tables. No, I think one person out of 100, took one of our DVDs. Sure. Very few people ever ate the fruit, And so, usually when somebody rents it, I'll see their profile first and have to accept whether we'll allow them to stay there, because we don't want partiers. We don't want other things. We just want people to come and enjoy our farm. And so if I feel like someone's open to it and wants to hear about it, then I might tell them, if I talk too much, raise your hand, because it's hard to stop me once I get going about it. but if somebody wants to hear about it, then I'm ready to fire. But if they show any occasion they don't want to hear about it, I just say, well, enjoy the place.
And if people want to reach out to you after this, if they'd like to get in touch or maybe find your books or DVDs and things like that, how can they find you?
Well, they can find me personally. They can email me I'm on Facebook. They can find me on Facebook under my name, R. Skurow, Skurow. They can go to our website, which is the letter U, the letter B, RAW.com, UBRaw.com. But all that you'll find there is our DVDs for sale. We sell them now downstreaming, I think, for $10. Yeah. But they could contact me on Facebook, or they could email me, rskurow@yahoo.com, and we're happy to help anybody as time and opportunity permits.
Excellent. So before we've been going about an hour, which is really appreciate the time you're giving us. What would be your last kind of thoughts before we bring this to a close? Your last pieces of advice for people that are curious about the raw food lifestyle, who are getting into it, who want to learn more about it?
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say, number one, love yourself. Love yourself, take care of yourself. And the best way to do that is to immediately get in touch with nature. Don't accept anything except for fresh air. Don't accept anything except for clear sunshine. Don't accept anything except for clean water. And don't accept anything except for clean food coming into your body. And rather than give specific things like, say, eat this or eat that, I'd say just avoid things in packages as much as you can. Look at the food. Go into a supermarket. Just ask yourself. Look at the food and say, well, did this come from nature, or did this come from a factory somewhere? If it came from a factory, just put it down. No matter what it says, no matter what they're telling you, no matter how many antioxidants and probiotics are in there, just put it down. And just realize that it's like learning music, or learning a new instrument, or learning a new language. You're going to have to learn some new things to love yourself.
Sure.
And simplicity. Keep it simple. Learn from all these people. Realize that there's some people are just trying to make money. Some people are really just trying to put their heart out there. And some people are, like me, I'm doing this out of my heart, but I might be wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe I should be taking supplements. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just telling you how I live and what we do. But listen to your inner body, love yourself, keep it simple, get in touch with nature. And when you do that, raw food is just going to come naturally because it is nature. And you'll figure it out. You'll be able to live on fruit and lettuce and a salad until you can figure out how to make a raw food pizza or whatever it's going to hit your comfort zone. You'll figure that out. But keep it simple, because in everything, whether it's business or art, it's always simplicity that ends up being one of the key factors.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ronnie, for joining us today. For everyone that wants to connect, you can go to ubraw.com to find out more, and if you want to communicate with Ronnie as well. He's on Facebook, as he was saying. And if you want to keep in touch with us, the Love Fruit podcast, you can go to fruitfest.co.uk and you can join our newsletter there to stay in touch. And there's also a shop there if you want to donate to us or get one of our t-shirts or hoodies or whatever. We appreciate that. But thank you for listening and watching the Raw Food, keep on saying the wrong thing, the Love Fruit podcast. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.